I can do this all day.
It's just a matter of time until I win it.
That's right. Still have not gotten the BMX bike, but I'm going to keep at it. That was my second and third attempt on getting it. I keep getting the headphones, which is fine because it matches with my jersey, my current jersey. So you won't see it in this video today, but I will definitely in future races have my matching headphones with my jersey. So this is the Zwift Games Stage 1, which is a sprinter stage. And even though I chose to do this the day after I finished FRR, which quite possibly was a stupid mistake, I still went through it anyways because, again, it's a sprinter stage. Why wouldn't I want to continue my goals of, rising the ranks in the Zwift sprinter category? So as we cut through Makuri and get through these back alleys, officially started the race there. We finished the lead in as we're going through. And so this has got to be the hardest race I've done yet. And I mean that outside of FRR. And I'm not talking about hardest because the stage is hard. I'm talking about, look at my average power right now. We are 2.5 minutes in, almost 3 minutes in, and I'm averaging 300 watts. And the pace really does not let down. Now, granted, we are in a pretty flat area, not too much elevation gain for the entirety of this stage, but this area specifically, pretty flat. And then also, it's not a long stage. It's, 14 kilometers, I believe, somewhere around there. And so the expectation is that it should be hard, it should be fast. I was looking at this kind of like one of the stages in the Zwift Insider Tiny Races. And so I thought, hey, why not? Why not join this race? It's going to be tough. It's going to be fast. But shouldn't be any more than 15, 20 minutes. And that's kind of how it all turned out. It did go pretty quickly. And so as we round the corner there, again, we're just all staying as a mob, going through the city and going through the nightlife of Makuri. And as you can see, my average watts really have not dropped that much. Still averaging about 40 kilometers an hour and 280-ish watts. And part of that is because I, at times will make my way up to the front of the group and then kind of soft pedal, let myself fall back and play that, back and forth undulation game. So if you're ever in the military, specifically in the U.S. military, you may know this reference from when you're doing long marches. As a Marine, our drill instructors would yell out AT&T. And when you hear that, the idea and what we responded with is reach out and touch somebody. And what that means is, the group is starting to stretch out. And when you hear the drill instructor or anybody yell AT&T, that means you're supposed to pick up the pace and move forward again. And that's kind of what happens throughout this race. You see JD highlighted there in the bottom left. And he and I were kind of going back and forth in this, in this group where you can kind of see us both and others, in the group see us both kind of fluctuating forward and backward. But at the end of the day, the goal was still to stay, with this front group or with this main group. I feel really bad for the people that did not make it off the start line the way we did. Because if you look at the group bubbles on the right-hand side, you'll see, there's 56 of us right now in this group, and then there's one lone person that's doing about 300 plus watts, about 20 seconds back, and then behind them, about another 30, 40 seconds back, there's a group of 12. I don't think they knew what was happening. I didn't know what was happening when we got started. I thought it was going to be like every other Zwift race, where we got started, we hit hard, and then, a kilometer into it or, 700 meters into it, we all start easing back, and then, we cruise at 200 watts until, again, this is a sprint race. Why are we doing Mach 10 when we could be doing 200 watts cruising And then once we get to the sprint itself, start to, um, start to then ramp up our power. Now, while I know others have put together recon videos, at the time I'd seen JD's recon video, but I didn't commit it to memory. I didn't watch anybody else's race. So looking at the map, I was kind of thinking like, I'm not sure what that little hump is towards the end. I wasn't really sure what I should be expecting. So I was thinking, hey, it doesn't look like a big elevation change. Shouldn't be difficult. But I will touch on what that was. And I know you've probably watched other races by now, so you know exactly what it is, but I will touch on why that became ultra important for me at that moment. And so as we again continue through the city, I had just done this stage for FRR not that long ago, so I felt like I knew what to expect going through the city. Now I didn't do this exact course, but I was in Makuri, and in Makuri for what felt like a long time for FRR. And so as I'm going through here, I'm feeling like these are a little bit more familiar roads. This is not a map that I use often, so I don't quite know it well enough to know, when I'm turning down different roads, what to expect or where to go. There are these small, 1 and 2% undulations throughout the road, and so that will kind of, speed you up, slow you down. I'm on uh, the DT Swiss disc wheels, and I wanted to, again, this is a sprinter's race, so I wanted to give maximum effort. I expected it to be flat and expected it to be, manageable with the disc wheels. There weren't any large elevation changes. That downhill portion on the map itself, I didn't quite know what to make of it when I looked at it. Again, I saw JD's recon video, but I didn't connect in my mind what it would be. And so as we're going through here, I'm recognizing like, oh, this is where we would normally come out of the cave system. So I'm like, great, we're going down the cave. Things will ease off as we hit the descent. And as we start to go downhill, I start to ease off my pace a little bit, but I start recognizing that the group is pulling away from me little by little. And when I see that, I start thinking like, oh no, I can't ease off, because if I ease off, I will end up losing the group. And so I just kept the pressure on and, kept pushing up to the front and really, really just basically not easing off at all. And you see, I'm still averaging 200, almost 260 watts, which is right at my FTP. And for such a short race, I didn't think I would have to do that much for this long. I thought it would be a little bit easier. And again, as we're hitting these downhills, we're not easing off that much. I'll ease off my wattage a little bit, but then I have to put the pressure back on just to kind of keep up and stay within this group. And as you can see, as we start to finally get towards the end of this, end of the cave, group eases off just enough to get you to feel comfortable. And then, again, we're back on it. I'm pushing up to 400 watts, mid 300s, just to kind of stay on the front. And then we hit the sand, which I know that, having maybe a bike like the Roubaix would be great for something like this, because you get a little bit of extra benefit on the sand itself. But once we hit the sand, I felt like my legs could not stop turning. Because the moment I soft pedal, I would start to make my way to the back, as I am right now. And again, had to push hard just to stay on with the group. And so as we're starting to make our way through this flat part, I kept thinking like, where are we going? I'm not only not used to this map, but not used to this map in this direction. I did ride the, what's the name of the route? One of the routes for ZRL and Z Racing, where we did this map like 400 times, and it was all in the same direction where we ended at the cave. So I knew kind of, how this route went, but at the same time, I didn't know where we were going in this direction. So I felt kind of lost at the moment. You see, there's one guy off the front, not really worth the effort, honestly. Like, I mean, he's probably no more than a second or two off the front, and everybody's just kind of, pushing, but not pushing hard enough to catch up. But at the same time, knowing that, that effort might not last very long, especially as we get closer to whatever this hill, structure is. And as we start to round this corner, I start to see a familiar shape in the distance. And I see the HUD open up, and I think like, man, that's, I wasn't quite sure at the moment, because again, I don't usually approach from this direction. But as we hit this ramp, I start to recognize what it is, and I'm thinking like, okay, I can hold my effort for the duration of this ramp. It's not very long. As you can see, I jumped up to about mid 300s, mid 400s, starting to push, touch the 500s for a second there, but ultimately, trying to stay in the mid 300s, holding the pack. My heart rate's in the 180s, and as we get to the top, I start to lose steam very fast. I start to realize that, you know, I don't know if I can make it. And as we start to hit this gravel and all this dust is kicking up, which by the way, if you didn't watch Strada Bianchi, you gotta watch it. You probably already know what happened, but if you didn't get a chance to watch it or watch the highlights, I would highly recommend it. And so as we're hitting this dust, I'm starting to lose sight of the group. And I stop pedaling. I'm thinking like, that's it. My race is done. I'm not going to be able to catch up. They're gone. They've gapped me. I don't know what to do. And I just kind of throw in the towel. And then I see that I'm, behind this small little group of 4 people. And I push and I push and I push because I'm thinking the group is right there. They're right in front of me. I've got 600 meters left. I know I can sprint for, 400 to 500 meters. So I know that all I need to do is just push a little bit harder to get onto this group. And as I start to latch back on again, my legs at this point are absolutely cooked. And I know that I just got to push a little bit harder just to catch up, but I can't turn my legs fast enough to keep rolling. And at that point, I decided that I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be able to catch them in order to not only place well, but I'm not going to be able to, really commit to trying to make my way through the group. I gave myself one last sprint, hopped into the 800s, but ultimately couldn't follow through with completing this sprint. And I got to say, that has gave me nightmares for an entire week. I have been in my own head about this finish for an entire week. And that's partly the reason why it's taken me a week to finish this video, finish editing, because as you can see, I kind of gave a little shake of my head, knowing that instead of pushing harder and catching up to the group where I was tens of meters off the back of them, I could have easily caught them. But knowing how hard I worked for FRR, how my legs felt, I just didn't commit to catching them and ultimately quit before I ever gave myself a chance to finish. And again, that narrative has been circling my head for the last week. And I know that, it's a race. It's not, the ultimate deciding factor. We got a handful of races left. So I'll post up the results, but basically, we've got 4 more stages left in increasing intensity all the way up to the very last stage, which is quite possibly as hard, if not harder, than some of the FRR stages that I've done. But this stage, I felt like I could have done better, but ultimately I didn't. I had a jam-packed week of other races that I did, so I didn't get a chance to race this stage again, which I really should have in order to redeem myself. But this week we are racing in the category is slightly shifted downward, and so it maxes out, I want to say, at 390. I think it's like 330 to 390, somewhere around there. My race score right now is 365, I think, or 364. So I fully expect to be able to not only redeem myself in terms of placement, but unfortunately I won't be able to redeem myself for this race specifically. And so I'm going to push harder on this next race and do my best to, get a better placement and compete, be competitive. But I got to say, this was quite possibly the hardest race I've raced in a while. You can see my average watts was 260 for the entirety of this race. My 20-minute power was just under my max, which is 3.2 right now. And so while I thought I would have done better with the 5-minute power, I still think I did pretty good. And again, this is just how racing goes sometimes. There are days where you show up and you do great, and then there are other days where you show up and you don't perform the way you thought you could or the way you thought you would, and you just keep going, keep racing. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, guys, cheers, and I will catch you guys in the next race.